Hey guys, Dr. Yu here. Today is a holiday, so I don't have to teach, so I found some time to redo part 1 of the skeletal system. All right, now let's do a quick overview. I want to talk about the functions first. The skeletal system supports and protects. Without the bones, without the cartilages, you can imagine that we are going to live like a slug, right? Just crawling on the ground like a worm. We would not be able to stand upright, do all the movements. Protection, your critical organs like the brain over here, right, enclosed by the skull. So the bones of the skull are really hard and very protective. And also your lungs, right, and your heart are protected by the rib cage, which is also known as the thoracic cage. So you can see all those critical organs are well protected by the skeletal system. Movement, this is another function for the skeletal system. This is actually achieved by the bones from the skeletal system and also muscles from the muscular system. So the muscles can contract, right? So when the muscles contract, because they're attached to the bones, the contraction can, pull the bones, move the bones. And then this is how you can generate, all sorts of movement. So the muscles are using bones as levers. Third function, hematopoiesis. Hemata refers to blood, and poiesis means production, genesis. Basically, the word means synthesis of blood cells. So who does the job of producing new blood cells? Because your blood cells have limited lifespan, right? And they need to be replaced. So who produces new blood cells? You might never think about the skeletal system, which could, perform such function, but it is the skeletal system, the bones, that make new blood cells, and specifically the bone marrow in bones. Okay, and there are two types of bone marrows: yellow bone marrow and a red bone marrow. So the yellow bone marrow is a storage site for lipid. Okay, so that's performed by yellow bone marrow. The red bone marrow primarily performs hematopoiesis, meaning they makes blood cells. That's kind of pretty straightforward, right? So think about the color we have given to the two types of bone marrow. So the red bone marrow has that kind of darker reddish color, which is the same color as the blood. So this is easy to remember. Red bone marrow produces blood cells, and yellow bone marrow, which is kind of yellowish, the color of fat, is a storage site for lipids. It stores fat. So the bones are also store minerals, not just lipids, but also minerals. And the main ones are calcium and the phosphate, right? So these minerals really provide the hardness to the bones, so that the bones have this very hardy texture, right? So that they can provide support and protection. The skeletal system is constructed of two of the most supportive tissues, basically the two hardest tissues in your body. Osseous tissue, which really just means bone tissue, and cartilage. So even though cartilage is a little bit flexible and not as hard as osseous tissue, they are pretty tough. That's why, some of the joints are formed by cartilage. When you look at this diagram, it shows you different bones in your body, and then you can see there are two colors. Okay, the two colors really indicate the two divisions of your skeletal system. The one that doesn't have any color or has this white color is the exoskeleton. So it's really kind of the gravity center of your body. So this includes the skull, which is here, the thoracic cage, which consists of the sternum and the ribs. And the last one is the vertebral column. So the vertebral column. Okay, so these three sections are part of the exoskeleton. All right, now everything else is part of the appendicular skeleton, which is basically what's attached to the exoskeleton, or you can think of it as appendages. All right, now it's easy to know that the bones in your limbs, right, are appendicular skeleton because they're kind of, not really in the center of your body. But some students think that the shoulder girdle and the pelvic girdle are also part of the axial skeleton, and that's not correct. All right. So the shoulder girdle or the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle, these two are part of the appendicular system because they're also kind of attached to the axial skeleton. All right, so a lot of students get this wrong. Now, what are the bones in the shoulder girdle? Your collarbone, which is called clavicle, right? And then your shoulder blade, which is called scapula, right? So these two bones form the pectoral girdle. So these two bones are part of the appendicular skeleton. Again, they're not the axial skeleton. All right. Now, same thing for the bones that form the pelvic girdle, like ilium, ischium. So those bones are also part of the appendicular skeleton. Types of bones we have in adults 206 bones. Right now, children may have slightly more bones than that, but as they grow, some of bones will kind of fuse. So in adults, normally we have 206 bones. We classify them to 4 main categories. And you kind of need to know what bones are in which category, especially, the obvious ones, the common ones. The first group is long bones. These bones, based on the name, they're going to be very long, so they're longer than they're wide. Now, very good examples are bones in your limbs, right? Like humerus, and then over here, there should be 2 bones here, your ulna, your radius, and then the bones in your hand, so metacarpals and phalanges. Now, I want to mention this real quick. When people look at phalanges, so you should have 3 phalanges in your, let me go back. You should have 2 phalanges in the thumb, right? And then 3 phalanges in the rest of the fingers. So you can see this is all 3, right? These phalange bones are kind of small, so a lot of students think they're short bones, but they're not. So if you look at them more closely, you can see they're still longer than they're wide. So these little phalange bones are still long bones, all right? And then the metacarpal bones, these are, again, kind of small, but they're still long bones. All right. And then same principle here. So the bones in the phalange bones and metatarsal bones in your feet, they're also long bones. So you have a metatarsals here, and then you have the phalanges in your toes. So those are also long bones. All right, in the second group, short bones. So these bones are usually cube-shaped. Cube-shaped. Very good examples are the bones in your wrist. So those are the carpal bones. So like these. So you can see they're, even though not, really kind of cube-shaped, but they're very, very close, right? With a little irregularities in there, but they are definitely, cube-shaped. They're not very long. So these are short bones. You also have short bones in your ankles. So right here you have tarsal bones. So those tarsals are also short bones. So I'm going to put it here. So you have carpals and you have tarsals. Those are very good examples of short bones. All right. Next group, flat bones. So these bones are kind of flat, of course. They're not always straight. Sometimes they can be curved. For example, the bones of the skull, they're flat bones, and some of the flat bones are really hard. Provides excellent protection. So think about the flat bones in your skull. What do they protect? They protect your brain, right? The most important organ in your body. All right, now think about the second most important organs and the protection. So the heart, the lungs. The heart, the lungs are protected by your thoracic cage, right? So the main bones in the thoracic cage are the sternum. Some people call it breastbone, and then the ribs, right? So all these bones are also flat bones, and they're pretty hard, right? So the thoracic cage, and you should know the ribs and the sternum. All right. Now people say, Ribs, they're kind of long and they're curved, but they are flat bones. So that's something you might want to pay special attention to, kind of, keep telling yourself the ribs and the bones of the skull are really flat bones. All right, now irregular bones. Those bones have irregular shapes. We can't really put them in any of the previous 3 categories. So we have a separate category for them. Good examples are vertebrae. So you see those vertebrae, when you look at them, they have this like a very cool shape. So vertebrae. All right, so those are irregular bones. And some people also put bones of the pelvis or bones of your pelvic girdle in this group as well. So they're irregular bones. All right, now there's a special group. I don't think it's mentioned in TEAS, but or TEAS study manual, but just in case, sesamoid bones are technically short bones, but they're a little bit special. Short bones, but they're kind of special because they are located within tendons. All right, now those are knee bones, which are called patella. So you have one patella in each knee, right? So they're right here. So these are the special sesamoid bones. All right, just in case. Okay, so that's the classification of bones. All right, now TEAS may give you a diagram and ask you to identify all the bones in our body. I found it's easy to just kind of find a blank diagram from the internet, download it, you can print it out, print out 3 copies, 5 copies, and then, just do it without any help, without looking at the textbook. Do it once, see how many bones you can get correctly, and then study, and then do another time, and then, again, study, especially on those that you missed, and then, just keep doing the practice, studying, and eventually you will get, all the bones correctly. It's not hard. I've had students who initially thought this was going to be so hard because there are so many bones I need to remember, but eventually, after a few practices, they get it without, much trouble. All right, now let's look at the gross structure of the bone. If you watch the second part, you know that we talk about the microscopic structures of the bone, right? So those are tiny little structures that you can't really see with your eyes. But here we're looking at gross structure, which means kind of bigger structure that you can see, pretty easily most of the times with your naked eyes. So the skeleton system, remember, or skeletal system, or I'm just going to say skeleton, your skeleton that includes all the bones, right? Your skeleton has 2 types of supportive tissues, right? Remember, osseous tissues and cartilage. Okay. All right, now we are going to kind of focus on the osseous tissue for now. All right, we'll talk about the cartilage later when we talk about joints. So we're looking at the gross structure and the microscopic structure of the osseous tissue only. All right. So when you look at osseous tissue, there are 2 distinct osseous tissues that can be found in your body. So those are compact bone and spongy bone. So when you look at this kind of figure or diagram, you probably notice there are 2 kind of different tissues, right? So this is one type, and this is one type. Those 2 layers are exactly the same. And then in the middle, this is like a weird looking type of tissue, right? So the smooth looking one is the compact bone. And the weird looking one is the spongy bone. So the compact bone is solid, right? There's no kind of open space within compact bone. It's very homogeneous, meaning, everywhere you see the tissue looks pretty much the same, right? So that's compact bone. Spongy bone, on the other hand, looks very weird, a little bit kind of futuristic looking, right? So you see all these kind of weird columns, right? Those columns are called trabeculae. So trabeculae is the plural form. And there's some open space in between trabeculae, right? So why do we have open space in the spongy bone? The open space houses a red bone marrow. And you know the function for red bone marrow, don't you? Red bone marrow, color red is also the color of blood. So red bone marrow is where blood cells are synthesized, right, which we call hematopoiesis. So you can usually find a red bone marrow in the open space in spongy bone. So hematopoiesis occurs in spongy bone and not compact bone. All right. Okay, so that's the differences between the two tissues. Now, this picture, this diagram shows you a typical structure of flat bones. They look like sandwiches, right? You have 2 layers of bread and you have whatever, you have in the middle. So the 2 layers of a compact bone, and then there is a layer of spongy bone in the middle. So flat bones usually have this kind of typical sandwich structure. How about other types of bones? Now, when you look at short bones, it's very, very similar to flat bones. Or, vertebrae, like those irregular bones. I'm just going to draw something crazy. So this is short bones, and this is irregular bones. They have a very, not exactly the same, but very similar structure as flat bone, which means the outer layer is going to be compact bone. So this is all compact bone. And then the middle layer is going to be spongy bone. So you're going to see these tuberculae, right, forming here. And then there's open space with a red bone marrow. And same thing for irregular bones. The outer layer is compact bone. And in the middle, you have, the spongy bone. So this layer is compact bone, and this layer is spongy bone. All right. All right, so that's the structure for these 3 types of bones. Now, I forgot I have this kind of real bone picture here to show you the 2 different osseous tissues. So you can see this is cross section, right? The smooth part, the outer layer, that's compact bone, right? So this is all compact bone. For this bone right here, the compact bone layer is pretty thin, right? Not as thick. And then all this kind of red color with some kind of holes, it really kind of looks like the sponge that we use to wash our dishes, right? This is all spongy bone. And then there's space where you can find the red bone marrow that makes new blood cells. Okay, this is a typical structure for a long bone. It's a little bit complicated, so let's look at the structures one by one. The main part of the long bone is this shaft called the diaphysis. Now, the shaft has a big central cavity called the medullary cavity. So the medullary cavity houses a red bone marrow when you are very young, when you're a baby, you're a child, right? As you get older, now different sources may have different, age information, but usually between, if I remember correctly, 7 to 10, the red bone marrow in the medullary cavity will be replaced by yellow bone marrow. So where does the red bone marrow go? It migrates to the end of the long bone, which are called epiphyses. So the term is right here, epiphyses. Now, in case you're wondering why this is proximal epiphysis and this is distal epiphysis, this is why. This will be a good kind of review of what we talked about before. So when we talk about the body direction, orientation terminology, we kind of compared proximal and distal, right? So if this is your body, the end that's closer to your body is called proximal. And the end that's further away from your body is called a distal. And usually these 2 terms are used for appendages, things that are attached to your body. So if this is the femur bone, excuse my drawing. I know it looks kind of ridiculous. If this is your femur bone, this will be the shaft, which is called diaphysis, right? And then this end is going to be the proximal epiphysis, and the other end that's further away from your body is going to be the distal epiphysis. So that's why these 2 ends have kind of slightly different terminologies. All right. So the next section I want to mention is this metaphysis. This is a section that's kind of between epiphysis and diaphysis. Now, in this section, there's a very important structure called epiphyseal line right here. If you see epiphyseal line, then you know that this is an adult bone. All right. Now, this structure, epiphyseal line, used to be a structure called epiphyseal plate. If you look at here, epiphyseal plate. So this is present in babies, children, when the long bones are still growing, those long bones have epiphyseal plate, which is also known as the growth plate. The epiphyseal plate is made of hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. So that's why on an X-ray image, you can see the epiphyseal plate or the growth plate really clearly. So if you look at the picture right here, this is going to be, see this line that has a darker color than the rest of the bone because it's cartilage, is not bone, right? So those two different tissues are going to be very different on the X-ray image. So the whitish part, grayish part, that's going to be the osseous tissue, the bone. And then this is going to be hyaline cartilage. And this is the epiphyseal plate, right? And then for the other bone, this is the epiphyseal plate. All right. So the epiphyseal plate or growth plate is present when you're very young, okay? Again, when the long bones are still growing. Once those bones stop growing, the epiphyseal plate, which is made up of hyaline cartilage, will ossify. So it will become the epiphyseal line. All right, now let's do the practice. Question 1, which of the following correctly identifies the location of the sternum on the body? So TEAS may give you a diagram and ask you to identify the bones, right? But more likely you will see questions like this that kind of indirectly test your knowledge of different bones and their locations. So to answer this question correctly, you need to know what is the sternum and where it is located. Right? So sternum is commonly known as the breastbone. So I want you to kind of locate this bone on your body. It's part of your rib cage, right? The anterior part of your rib cage. When you touch it, it's very flat, it's very hard, it protects your heart. So the sternum is a flat bone and it's very, very protective. So now you know where it is, which one is the correct answer. I'll give you a few seconds. Right, I said the sternum is the anterior part of the rib cage, right? So in humans, the anterior is equivalent as a ventral, right? So it's on the ventral side, and it's also in the superior part of your body. So the correct answer is C. Okay, next question. Which of the following is a short bone? So there are a lot of choices there. I'm going to give you a few seconds. Okay, radius, femur, phalanges, remember they're all long bones. Right? And the scapula is flat bone. Vertebrae, irregular bone. So the correct answer is carpals, right? I could replace carpals with tarsals, and it's still the correct answer. So carpals, tarsals are short bones. And also the sesamoid bone, patella, is also a type of a special short bone. Number 3, which of the following is not a function of the skeletal system? Give you a few seconds. Okay, the correct answer is D. This question actually tests your knowledge of both the skeletal system and the system that synthesizes vitamin D, which is, I hope you can remember that. Right, the skin. And what do we call the skin? The integumentary system, right? We also talk about that the skeletal system has a bone marrow, right, in different types of bones, and the bone marrow is the site for hematopoiesis. So the blood cells include red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. So these are correct. And also bones store minerals, right, like calcium and phosphate. All right, that's it. I hope it's a helpful Sorry guys, it may take me a long time to make the rest of the videos. We'll see. This is a very busy semester for me. I don't know, originally I was going to record a couple during the winter break, but because of the holidays and the pandemic, it really didn't work out. So hopefully I can get some time in the summer to finish the rest of the videos. All right, good luck. I hope if you're taking TEAS, you will get very good grades. All righty, thank you guys.